Hello everyone, the iPhone 8 Plus is one of those iPhones that's been around for so many years now, so let's go and take a look at how this particular iPhone holds up in 2024 and see if it's still worth buying. Now, I will tell you from my specific perspective, I do think this iPhone is very interesting. I think it was kind of the ending of an era from Apple, and if you don't remember, the iPhone 8 Plus came out basically the exact same time as the iPhone 10, and the iPhone 10 was this new foray for Apple. It was this brand new kind of device landscape that they made, and it was a very cool thing. They ended up obviously with the iPhone 8 Plus still kind of keeping the design around a little bit like with the iPhone, SE3 and SE2, but this was kind of it. This was the last Plus, iPhone that looked like this. Since the 14 Plus we got a little bit of a change in design obviously, but the 8 Plus was kind of the last one that looked like this at this bigger size. So it's a very interesting phone. If you do want to pick up some phones, I would recommend buying this year though. Links will be down in the description. Get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the iPhone 8 Plus, on the front side, you can see that the specific phone has that 5.5-inch IPS panel on the front. Now, this panel really isn't that amazing, it's not that great anymore, but it was like a pretty good panel even when it first came out. It's a 1080p display, so that in and of itself is a very cool thing. And otherwise, there's not like anything else super crazy going on with it, but it's a good looking phone. It's a good looking display, 60 hertz, as you probably expect from a 2017 device. You're getting a little bit of bezel, noticeable amount of bezel on the top and the bottom here, but it's kind of what you'd expect. And I would say for a 2017 phone, this thing clearly doesn't look like the greatest, but it's still like a good looking phone. Like I'm still a fan of it for the most part, and I think that's something kind of cool going on for this particular phone. You are getting Touch ID 2 on the front, which I'm totally cool with. Having Touch ID 2 is completely fine. It would be nice to have gestures, which we'll talk about in a second, but otherwise the front of this phone looks pretty good for the most part. On the bottom side, you're getting that Lightning port, which is great. Being able to plug this thing in and charge it is amazing, and I'm glad that we have this type of capability on this particular phone from that side. And on the back side, we have this standard glass back. So the big difference here is most phones nowadays have the frosted glass back, but still having standard glass backs is very, very nice. And I, for one, like I said before, it's a very nice feature to have. On top of that, when you're getting this type of phone, you're still getting a very, very good type of, build quality. It's a very good performing phone from the exterior. And when I hold this phone against things like the iPhone 14 and iPhone 13, there's still lots of overlap. These phones still feel and look very, very premium for sure. So I will tell you, you're still getting that dual camera setup on the back, wireless charging, you're getting IP certification. There's still a lot of stuff to like about this phone, but there's clearly some reasons why I wouldn't recommend buying this, which I'll talk about in a second. But from the hardware on the exterior, of course it's an older looking phone, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's like a super old or bad looking phone or an ugly phone. I still think this thing looks very, very good for the most part. So from that perspective, that kind of covers it up there. Now moving on to basically the, camera side of things, this particular phone has that dual camera setup on the back side. So it has that, wide and telephoto lens, and it also has that front facing camera as well. Now, the good of this camera is that, it's a multi-camera setup, so it's not just one camera. You're getting multiple different cameras here, which is nice. You're still getting that, telephoto lens, so you can zoom in into a photo quite a bit, and you're still getting 4K at 60 on the back. You're getting 1080p at 60 on the front, and I think that's something really cool going on for this particular phone. Having that type of capability is very, very awesome, and I think that in and of itself is a very cool thing. Now, I would probably tell you the main disadvantages of this phone. There's not really a crazy amount. One, obviously the lens isn't as good as it used to be, so it's definitely not going to be at the best looking camera of all time as you'd probably expect. On top of that, I would probably say the lack of an ultra-wide sensor is kind of weird. I would love to have an ultra-wide sensor, and if you're getting a phone like this, you're probably going to notice that you are kind of missing out on that particular lens, more so than you probably feel like if this phone didn't have a telephoto lens. I feel like you wouldn't miss a telephoto lens too much, but that ultra-wide sensor you'd probably miss more if I'm being completely honest. Now also, the lack of 4K at 60 on the front also can be a little tiny bit of an issue. Like, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but it's going to be one of those minor things that you're going to run into there as well. So I would probably tell you that without a doubt, this camera, when it first came out, was great. But nowadays, you're probably going to be better off if you buy a phone that maybe has a bit of a better camera here. So that's just one of those things to kind of keep in mind here as well. So otherwise, that kind of covers it up here for the most part. Now, in terms of software, this is probably the biggest disadvantage of this phone that I can probably think of. And this is probably the reason why I look at a phone like this and probably wouldn't recommend it to the vast majority of people. So with something like the iPhone 8 Plus, The biggest problem, or I would say the biggest disadvantage of this particular phone, is probably the fact that this thing is it's like not really supported with software completely. Like it's still getting some software updates via iOS 16, but this phone has been discontinued with software since like iOS 16, since like 2022. So I would hate to recommend a phone to people if that phone is no longer going to be supported with software. And although this thing is like clearly like still kind of supported with software, I just really wouldn't recommend buying it because it's an outdated device. So this thing's not going to be getting iOS 17. It already hasn't gotten it. It's definitely not going to be getting iOS 18. And that's just kind of what happens when you're getting this type of device. So like I said, I would not recommend buying this phone if you plan on using this phone on an everyday basis. And like I said, that's just kind of what happens. I like this phone a lot, but unfortunately from the software side, it just doesn't make that much sense to buy it because you're already outdated and you're already getting a phone that is kind of outdated with software when it kind of comes down to it. So that kind of covers it up here if I'm being completely honest. Now on the other side, from the performance side, it's funny because this phone's performance is still actually like pretty decent for the most part. So with something like the iPhone 8 Plus, it had that Apple A11 Bionic chip inside of it with 3 gigabytes of RAM. And the interesting thing about this particular phone is that it's actually like a pretty decent performing phone. Like it's actually not that terrible. I've done a lot of app opening speeds and a lot of like gaming on this phone even the last year or two, and basically everything I've ever done with this phone, it's done a good job at kind of holding up, which is something I actually like a lot. Now, the disadvantage of this phone, I would say, is that one, you would not comprehend if you've never compared this before, the difference between a home button iPhone and a gesture-based iPhone. The fact that this iPhone basically has that gesture, has that home button, makes things feel and perform so much slower than something like a gesture-based iPhone like the iPhone 10. When I'm using my iPhone 8 Plus and I'm using my iPhone 10, I can feel noticeable differences between the two. And you would not believe how insane that is. It's just a fact. It's pretty crazy. But I would definitely tell you that an iPhone that has, a gesture-based design would definitely perform better and feel so much better and faster than something like the iPhone 8 Plus that has that home button design. Beyond that though, for basic things, like opening up apps and, playing games and all that stuff, it's probably going to be fine, but it's not going to be close to the iPhone 15, and it's not going to be as good as something even like an iPhone 11. So I'd probably tell you if you want a sweet spot, the iPhone 11 is probably a better one. We'll get into that in a second. But the iPhone 8 Plus's performance is good enough. It gets the job done. But definitely if you want to go up a notch, I think something like the iPhone 13 or iPhone 11 would probably be better off than this thing. So to kind of sum it up, what else I can tell you is I like the iPhone 8 Plus. I've always liked it, and I still think it's like a very, very good phone for sure. But the thing I'll tell you about the iPhone 8 Plus is that it's just no longer buying as your main device. It doesn't make a lot of sense to buy a phone like this in this day and age. And the reason for that is because this particular phone is just kind of stuck in the past. You're getting a phone that is severely, in my opinion, very, very outdated. It's not going to be a phone I'd recommend buying because it's already an outdated device. So not only is it outdated in software, but unlike the iPhone 10, it's also outdated like from the exterior. Like it makes like this phone looks and feels very, very old. It doesn't feel and perform like a good priced phone in this day and age. The iPhone 10 you can maybe swing by, but the iPhone 8 Plus, just the hardware outside, it just doesn't speak that well to me anymore. So that kind of covers it up here if I'm being honest. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.